Hyperion Geo. We're so glad you're able to join us this morning, and we are excited to show you this new feature our team has been working so hard on while exploring such an important topic in the industry today. So welcome, I'm Sophia LaChapelle. I'm an account manager here at SynMax, and I'm joined by Eric Anderson, our CTO, and Rahul Verma, our head of commodities. I'm going to let Eric and Rahul just dive right in and take it away, but at the end we will be having a Q&A, so feel free to submit questions through the portal here. And with that, I'll hand it off to Eric.
Awesome. Thanks, Sophia. Like Sophia said, my name is Eric. I'm the CTO, joined by Rahul Verma, our head of commodities. Really appreciate you taking time out of your Wednesday morning to join us as we discuss our new feature, which launched to all Hyperion customers this morning. It's a geospatial analysis tool called Hyperion Geo. And we're also going to be talking about our DTIL project, DTIL, not detail, which has something that we've been working on for almost a year now, seeing some really interesting results out of that. And we're going to share some insights and also how you can explore as a Hyperion customer DTIL inventories using our new feature, Hyperion Geo. So DTIL is a new term in the energy trading lexicon. It's a practice that's actually been going on for a while, and I'm going to talk about the history of it in a moment. But real quick, let's just review the well life cycle so everybody understands what a DTIL is. The term DTIL stands for delayed turned-in line, and specifically we're talking about the very end of the well life cycle. So as all of you I'm sure are familiar, wells get drilled. We have a rig moving on site, we have a rig leaving. SynMax defines a DUC, a drilled but uncompleted well, from the moment the rig arrives until the frac crew leaves and a well is completed. This is a slight differentiation from how others in the industry define it. The EIA defines a DUC actually at the end of drilling. SynMax defines it at the beginning of drilling because we like our DUCs to be a bit more of a leading indicator, and we feel like if a rig is showing up on site, then a rig is obviously going to leave, and so we might as well bring those into our DUC count early and give that a little bit more of a proactive edge. But nonetheless, after the frac crew leaves, and SynMax is monitoring all this with daily satellite images, we have what is called traditionally a TIL lag, which is after the frac crew leaves, the well is not yet into production. Many wells, in fact, most wells nowadays, because the laterals have grown so long, they're completed in stages. And the way that producers complete those stages is by putting large plugs underground, and they complete one section of the lateral at a time. Well, after the frac crew leaves, those plugs have to come out of the ground in order for the well to be brought into service. And so you usually have a small drilling rig, like a sputter rig, or a coiled tubing job that comes in and drills out those plugs, and then a small portion of that well is flowed back, pulling out all of that material, that plug material off and filtered out, and then the well is shut in. The well is actually not producing yet until the flowback crew arrives, what we sometimes call a TIL crew. And what happens then is when the frac job is being performed, a lot of sand, proppant, and water is pumped underground. All of that needs to come out of the ground. And when the well is flowed back, there's specialized equipment that helps handle that volume of material. And so what SynMax is doing with our DTIL monitoring project is we're taking what has traditionally been a very reliable turned-in line lag. In the past, we've modeled this to be around 21 days with a standard error of about 7 days. And we're looking for anomalies in this behavior using high-resolution satellite images for operators deliberately holding back turning these wells into service as a means of using them as kind of like a virtual production. So the most prominent example of this, and I think the period when the term DTIL really became commonly talked about in the energy trading world, was on February 21st, when Chesapeake released their end of year 2023 earnings presentation. And they announced to the world and their investors that they were going to be embarking on an outsized deferred TIL program, whereby they were going to be completing the wells, as we discussed before, but they're going to be strategically holding these wells in inventory for times when prices are right, and it's more optimal for them to bring them online. I think this is a brilliant move by Chesapeake and the others that are exercising it. As many of you know, we've had a huge amount of production growth over the last 10 years in the U.S., and we have not had the same kind of growth in storage capacity. So even though we've seen a doubling of production, we're up over 100 BCF a day now, We have not seen a subsequent build out in storage, and this creates a very steep contango curve in the futures market. So operators like Chesapeake and others are realizing that there's a market need for storage, and they're using their wells as a means of virtual storage. It makes a lot of sense when you think about it. An operator looks at their well and they see the molecules falling out from under the ground and going through 100 miles of pipeline, and then they go to a storage operator and they go right back in the ground and they say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't seem like a very efficient system. What if we were to delay bringing the wells on time to moments when the market wants those molecules most and kind of operate like a virtual storage operator ourselves? And so that's what Chesapeake and others have started doing to a much larger extent. And it's become something very material and important for energy traders to monitor, because this is, outside of SynMax's operation to monitor these details, something that is not visible to the market. This doesn't get accounted for in the EIA storage number, but it very much is a form of storage. And I think people who are participating in the market need to be aware of this, and they need active intelligence on it. Now, something I want to point out here on this chart on the right, the timing was very interesting. So when Chesapeake announced, and I've got February 21st highlighted there, we saw a pretty precipitous decline in production following that. And I think there was a misperception in the market at that time that that decline in production was entirely because of this new DTIL program. That, we were seeing this because of Chesapeake and other operators, delaying the turned-in line on their wells. And that is part of the story, but it's not really the whole story. So, we saw production decline, and we've seen production kind of come back up. And I think naively, it's easy to come to the conclusion and say that, oh, okay, the operators must have been detailing their wells and they must have brought them online, right? And that's why we're seeing production return. And, what SynMax does for our customers is we try to quantify exactly what the production elasticity is at any period of time. So, for example, in May, when we'd seen production pull back from the highs in February, SynMax was informing our customers of the three important buckets of production, which we're always giving you updates on. And the first one is productive capacity, and it is the most lagging elastic factor of production. Productive capacity is essentially an operator's optionality to ramp up or down their frac crews, change their completions. And it's the most lagging because once you change frac crews, you're not going to see an impact on production for at least 60 days. That's the amount of time it takes from when the crew arrives on the well pad to when the well is actually in service. And so if an operator wants to be elastic and wants to be reacting to price, this is the first lever they can move, but it's a slow moving lever. There's only 60 days. So during this low point in May, we saw productive capacity declines. That was part of the story. It was primarily coming from Haynesville, Louisiana. And we had estimated that this bucket of elasticity was about 1.25 BCF a day. In fact, it just so happened that at this period, the productive elasticity was kind of split evenly between these three different categories. The second one is the one we're talking about today, which is deferred TILs. And we estimate at that point that the impact of deferred TILs on the market in May was again about 1.25 BCF a day. Deferred TILs, they're a little bit more fast reacting than productive capacity. So it's a lever producers can move where they can get a little bit of a more immediate impact on production. But we expect that for an operator to be able to turn all of their deferred TILs in lines, there are constraints in the system. They do have to have enough TIL crews, enough flowback crews to be able to do it. And our estimate is that that lag is about 30 days. If they have an inventory of details and they want to bring that in line, it's going to take them 30 days to be able to move that in. And then the final one is one that you're all probably familiar with, and that's shut-ins and curtailments. We see that all the time. When prices dip below certain levels, especially in the Northeast, where we have a constrained region, producers really with the click of a mouse, somebody in Oklahoma City, right, can click a mouse and all of these wellheads, or just about all of these wellheads, they have remote actuators on them that allow operators to very quickly shut in production and react to prices. And you'll get this happening all the time. There's some shut-ins that were recently brought back online and came offline in the Northeast, and it's an extremely sudden change in the chart, and that's because it only takes I say 1 day up there. It's really 0 days for an operator to decide to shut in or curtail some of their production. So a big part of what we do at SynMax is keeping our customers informed. When we see changes in production, right, what is that due to? How is production elastically responding to price? And what levers are producers moving, and what levers do producers have left to move in order to change production should conditions change. So I talked a little bit earlier about the fact that DTILs are nothing new. DTILs, I think they are a much more important thing to this market. I think we're seeing a lot more DTIL activity, and honestly, I believe we're going to see more DTIL activity in the future. I think, this is kind of a new innovation that producers are using in their toolbox in order to better optimize their assets and get a better return on their investment in these wells. Well, a real prominent example of DTILs in the recent past was in 2023. So I've got a chart up here of Pennsylvania dry gas natural gas production. And last November, a lot of us saw what traders were calling a production surprise in November. I don't think anybody was really expecting it. Honestly, we weren't tracking DTILs at the time. We didn't start our DTIL process until February. And so there was a large surge, about 0.7, 0.8 BCF a day in Pennsylvania natural gas production. Well, now that all of that data is available from the state, and we've gone back in time and we've collated that data with SynMax frac crew data, we can see exactly what the story was on this. And it turns out that this was a DTIL story. So that surprise in natural gas production that we saw last November in Pennsylvania was actually because Chesapeake, EQT, Seneca, Range Resources, Cortera, et cetera, as you can see on the table on the right here, they were all participating to some extent in DTIL inventory bringing, and then they all brought that online very quickly in November. So, you can see here on the chart on the left, this was not something that was a decision made overnight. In order for operators to be able to exercise their DTILs, they have to build them up over time. And so what I've got here is going back into 2023, looking at the state reported data of when these wells came online, and then collating that with the SynMax frac crew data, which we're taking every day by satellite. I can tell you exactly how Chesapeake was building up their delayed TIL inventory. And what's interesting about this chart is they started building up these DTILs in April of 23. So this was very premeditated. This was very deliberate. This is them optimizing their assets as best as they can. And they steadily grew their inventory of DTILs, and then they brought it all online in November. And so the objective of what SynMax is trying to do with this DTIL project, obviously we can't wait for the state data to come out. It'll be too late then, right? The impact of DTILs will already have occurred, is to bring this kind of information up into real time, to give traders an idea of exactly how much DTIL inventory exists among a variety of operators and what the potential there is for future production surprises. So this next chart is client only. This is a public webinar. I sent out an email this morning to all SynMax clients with the uncensored version of this PowerPoint. So what we're displaying here is basically Chesapeake's current DTIL inventory based on our satellite observations. So the DTIL project, has spanned many months. We've done a lot of work, getting exact counts of exactly what Chesapeake, EQT, Southwesterns, and others DTIL inventories are. And if you compare this chart to the chart on the previous slide, you'll understand immediately what the potential is for a production supply surprise this winter versus last winter, right? So Chesapeake, of course, announced this expanded DTIL program. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to stick to it, right? There's questions about, whether Chesapeake, whether other operators are actually sticking to their DTIL plans. Are they actually building up this inventory? Have they given up on it? Did they pull that back early? Did they exercise their DTIL option earlier? Is that part of the reason why we saw production grow? Well, these charts answer that question. Or is there potential for another production surprise this winter? If you're a SynMax client, you can check your email and you can see the answer to that question on this slide. So let's talk about what it takes to actually run the DTIL project, because it is a significant undertaking. So the very first thing that SynMax has done in order to do this is we've had to get the current state of all of these wells, right? As you know, the state data is lagged. In some of the best states, maybe it's 4 months lagged, but in some of the states in the Northeast, this data could be lagged a year or more, right? And so, there is no public data source that can tell us immediately what the state of these wells are. And so really that was our first undertaking with this project, was to determine what it was. We used a combination of private investigators checking these wells to see what their production status was, And then in other areas, we use thermal drone surveys. So a lot of people don't know, but gas, when it comes out of the ground, it's extremely hot, and that makes it detectable in very sensitive drone thermal camera images. So we did surveys across all of the subject areas, all the important operators that are participating in DTILs, and we got a current status of all of their wells, whether they're flowing, whether they're shut in, whether they're detailed. The next step is we have to engage in persistent monitoring. So persistent monitoring, that's kind of SynMax's specialty. We are the satellite people in the oil and gas industry. I think we've earned that reputation. But what's interesting is, the TIL crews, and you can see this on the screen here, are much, much smaller and much more difficult to detect. And also the activity is a lot more ambiguous when you're looking at other components of the well life cycle than just looking for a rig or a frac crew. When we're looking for a rig or a frac crew, it's a very obvious event, and we use medium resolution satellite imagery. And we can reliably, with medium resolution, tell when a frac crew is on site, when a rig is on site, and make those measurements and distribute them out to clients. But in order for us to be able to measure the presence of a cleanup job or a plug drilling job, whether that be a rig, a sputter rig, or a coiled tubing job, we have to use higher resolution satellite images. So that's what we've done here, and since February, we've been taking high resolution satellite images of all the wells, which we've already established the status of. As soon as the frac crew comes on site, we start taking those regular high resolution satellite images, and we start detecting every step along the way exactly what state these wells are in. So in the example here, you see we have the frac crew on the far left of the screen. After the frac crew leaves, there's a little bit of a cleanup that occurs, and that is a noticeable event, not to be confused with any of the things to come. Then we have the plug drill out job, which in this case is a coiled tubing job. It could also be a sputter rig. The well, after that, it could go immediately into flowback, but when it's a detail, it goes into a period of inactivity. We continue monitoring the wells even when these are inactive. And then finally, we have the flowback job, or the turned in line job, as we've been calling it, which is when they bring on specialized equipment to handle that excess volume of proppant, sand, and water that comes out initially when they bring a well online. And that is the final indicator. It usually gives us about a 3 to 7 day indication before the well, oil and gas, is going to hit the pipelines. And then the final step, and this is where Hyperion Geo comes in, is we want to make sure that we're collating all of this intelligence with accurate predictions of what these wells are going to produce. It's one thing for us to deliver to our customers and say, hey, we have this many wells that are in a detailed status, but it's almost anecdotal at that point. In order to turn it into real intelligence, we have to make accurate predictions about exactly what these wells are going to produce, and that's what we do. So we collate that with our short-term forecast model, which is a well-level model that we've been giving out to clients for over a year, and we tell our customers exactly what the detailed inventory is, not just in number of wells and operator and where these are located, but also how much production is sitting idle in that virtual storage bucket ready to come online. So the deliverables, or the goals of the detail project, which I guess I should stop calling it the detail project because it is now a permanent part of Hyperion. We are going to continue monitoring these and providing this intelligence to our customers in perpetuity. So the purpose of our detailed data set is, first of all, to give our customers an accurate reading of what detailed inventories are, so they know what production has the potential to come online, what levers producers have to be able to move to bring that detailed production in. Next, be the first ones in the market to know when this stuff is coming up. Like I said earlier, there's a 3 to 7 day lag between when these crews first start forming on well pads to turn them in line and when the production actually hits the pipe. So SynMax customers are going to be the first to know when operators are bringing this stuff into production. There should no longer be any more November, December, January, whatever month it happens to be, surprises. If you are a SynMax Hyperion subscriber, we want you to be the first to know when this production is going to be arriving. And finally, like I was talking about earlier, we want to be able to accurately predict near-term production. So we're collating this with our advanced models, which Rahul and his team have built to accurately predict what these wells are going to be producing, so that customers are not surprised when production arrives. So I'm going to reshare my screen here real quickly, and I'm going to give you a quick tour of Hyperion Geo. So let me just click on over to Hyperion Geo. Okay, so like I said, this is a platform or a feature that launched to all Hyperion customers this morning. The way you're going to access it, log into your energy dashboard, and you'll have a new icon here called Geo, which is our geospatial map. I'm not going to show you the whole thing because, again, we want to keep that data proprietary and private to customers, but I've zoomed in just on a small section of delayed till wells. And the way that I do that is, obviously I've turned off the rigs, I've turned off the frac crews, I've selected just the wells, I've gone into the filters, and I've selected well statuses that are in a DTIL state, a delayed till state. And then the area that I've zoomed in here, this is West Virginia, right? So you have Pennsylvania, you have Ohio, we're just in the northern part of West Virginia. The MVP pipeline, which is now in service, is running somewhere along here, right? And I'm going to zoom in on this EQT well pad. EQT is the father of super well pads. They are the company that more often than any other we see, they put as many wells as they can on these well pads. And with Hyperion Geo, the first thing we can do, we can click on any of these individual wells. We can look at the production starts. This is not what this well is actually producing. This is what we expect the well to produce when it comes online, because it's currently in its DTIL state. And then the next thing we can do is we can details, including all of those high resolution satellite images that SynMax is taking every couple of days, to understand ourselves what state these wells are in. So obviously we have all the well information here. Like I said, this is an EQT well pad. We have a recent image of the well pad. And if I want to go into a little bit more detail, I can click on this satellite imagery timeline. All right, so let me explain what you're seeing here. So this was the most recent optical image that we've taken, and that's what most people are familiar with, but there's actually a lot of different satellites up in space, and we have all of them here on this screen, going all the way back to when the well pad was cleared, right? So this first image here is called a SAR image, and that's a high-resolution SAR image, SAR standing for synthetic aperture radar. So in any instance where we cannot get a clear shot of the well pad with an optical satellite, because maybe there's a cloud in the way, we then take a SAR image to make sure that we're getting consistent coverage of it. And that's what these black and white images are. You can still see a lot of the detail. From this, we can still infer the state of the well, even though it's not as pretty as the optical image. Interestingly, a SAR image is about 4 times as expensive as an optical image, but it's part of what we need to do in order to maintain custody of what the current status of every well is. These images right here, these are low resolution European Space Agency SAR images. They're not useful at all in this regard, but we do pull them in automatically. So for these purposes, you can just ignore these. And then I want to show you the difference between a high resolution image. In fact, let me go down here maybe to frac crew. Okay, so we've got a high resolution image where we have the frac crew, and you can see all the frac trucks backed up performing the frac job. And this is a medium resolution image. So medium resolution images, you can see they're adequate for detecting the frac crew. They're not adequate for looking at very fine detail, which is why we're bringing in this high resolution imagery. All right, so with that, we're going to explore Hyperion Geo in a little bit more detail. And to do that, I'm going to pass things off to Rahul. Rahul?
Thanks, Eric. So let me just start sharing my slide deck here. Okay. So I think Eric has covered quite a few things already. So I'm just going to add a bit more color into what keep adding more and more capabilities to it. Currently what the overall features look like are, firstly, you have bell data, which is categorized by the subregion or the play. Like you have categories in Permian, Haynesville, etc. You can go in and filter the well data by when the well was spud, or when the well was completed. And there's also well statuses, like Eric just showed you, details, but you can also filter it by active, shut-in, ducts. So there's a variety of ways you can view the well data by. And This is true across the lower 48. This is true for all active plays in the lower 48. So there's quite a lot of data that you can filter just on the well level. In addition to that, we have production charts, which are both for historic state-reported production and also our own forecast. So there will be some wells which have not started reported production yet from the state, but they are most likely active. So for those wells, you're going to see like the complete decline curve, which is all forecasted. And for other wells which are active and you have some state-reported production. So for those wells, we show decline curves which go out 10 years. So with that, I'm just going to show a little bit about what the interface looks like. So Eric just showed you some charts, which is basically the well dashboard, where you can see the overall satellite imagery timeline. So in this case, you'll see there's a lot of the low resolution SAR images for this particular well path. But you also have medium resolution images and some high resolution images as well. So this is a way in which you can view information at the well path level. And you can also click on individual wells and look at so in this case, this is fully a forecasted well. There's no state-reported production for this particular well API. But for others, like you'll have some reported production and 10-year declines going out. There's also a variety of ways in which you can filter the data. So I think this region question is of interest to like a pretty wide variety of clients. So the way SynMax splits up these regions are basically there's 4 major regions. There's the Gulf, the West, Northeast, and Midwest. In the Gulf region, which is perhaps the most important one for a lot of customers, so we basically split it into subregions by state. So for example, the Haynesville is split up into Haynesville, Texas, and Haynesville, Louisiana. The Permian is actually split up into West Texas, and then there's another section of the Permian which sits in the West major region, which is in Permian, New Mexico. So we split up the Permian into those 2 categories, and that's there's also some logic to it because the Permian, New Mexico side tends to be much more gassy than West Texas. So that's kind of the logic for splitting up the Permian. In the Northeast, you have these 3 major regions, which are Northeast Pennsylvania, Ohio, Southwest Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and finally you also have the Midwest. So all which covers North Dakota and Oklahoma at the moment. There's also some other more minor producing regions like Mississippi and Arkansas, which we are not displaying for this demo, but we do have data for that. Like it's not a lot of additional data to put onto the tool, so we are most likely going to include it. Just for today's demo, we haven't included those minor regions. In addition, you can also filter it by operator. You can select multiple operators and filter data by multiple operators. For example, if you pick Chesapeake, so you just need to. So there are some operators which have merged over time and so on. So we have gone through a lot of effort to clean up those operators. So these are still some of the active operators, and you can start showing Chesapeake wells here. So this is not all of Chesapeake wells because I also have other filters here for when these wells were spud. So I'm only showing wells which were spud after January 2023 and going up to the present. So one other thing which we built out for was specifically for looking at neighboring operators of a given selected operator. So the way that works is we don't just look at the nearest wells of a given operator. We for every single well, we count all the neighbors, and then we come up with what are 5 neighboring operator counts, which are not the same operator. So that kind of gives a different view as to just drawing like a little radius around an individual well. And so you can look at operators, based on which state they are operating in. So in this case, for Chesapeake, we have picked Texas and Louisiana because we also have like a Gulf filter here. So that's where the Chesapeake operators are currently present. And once you kind of select that, it's going to show up like the most prolific neighboring operators of Chesapeake for the state of Louisiana. So in this case, it's Aton, Comstock, Exco, Shell, and Southwestern. So this kind of brings you a lot of color into when you're comparing performances of different operators. You can go into each of these wells, do the same thing, like look at individual well paths, look at the satellite imagery, production charts, forecasts. So there's a lot of data which is condensed into this view. And similarly, you can also filter by which wells are shut in, active, completed, permitted, DUCs. So there's a lot to explore here. I'm not gonna go into all of it at the moment, but yeah, like it's like I was mentioning earlier. We have a lot of ambitions for this tool. Like we want to keep adding more and more features to this. And those are some of the things I wanted to start talking about for our future roadmap for this tool. So there's basically 5 different categories of features, which I think are going to be out very soon. So one is production data aggregations, which is basically looking at views of like a collection of wells instead of just an individual well. Another one is smart search, which is about looking at templates, like predefined templates about some kind of a custom analysis which a user might want to do. Thirdly, there's pipeline map layers, geology, and lastly, there's specialized analysis, which we do as a one-off in the past. Before I get into the more details of this roadmap, I just want to say one of the overall objectives of the Hyperion Geo tool is to bring to the fingertips of the customers basically all of the data which SynMax has to offer. So in the past, we have basically offered aggregated views of our data, like, for example, aggregated production across the whole subregion, aggregated short-term forecasts, views for, let's say, the whole Permian. But the way we put together our data, we have to basically create a lot of different data sets, which includes permits, which includes production data, well data. So all of that data currently just sits in our database and is available to our customers through API endpoints. And this tool is one of the main intentions is to expose all of that to our customers. So, and we strongly believe that should enable like a lot of very powerful analysis. So going into the first one, for example, we want to do production data aggregations. So here I'm, for example, showing like, let's say you filtered data for one particular subregion and you just filtered it for Chesapeake, and you started doing stacking that data in terms of the vintage of a well. So this is kind of a view which we are working on, which should come out very soon on Hyperion Geo, where you should be able to filter the state data by oil, gas, other products, and by formation, operator, region, completion, the completion vintage, and the spud vintage. And you could then stack these aggregations by like the same categories as before, but then you also have options related to the forecast modeling. So this is something which which already kind of exists on the back end, but we want to bring it to the Hyperion Geo front end very soon. The next category of features that we are working on is smart search capabilities. So the first one is just a very basic search where you can search wells and leases by the API number. So that's It's pretty straightforward. You just type in the API number or the well name that you're looking for, and it zooms into that well or well pad on the map. But something which we are trying to go beyond that smart search capabilities is to create these preset templates. The idea for those templates is that you can manipulate the filters on Hyperion Geo using these templates, and so that there's the number of clicks that you need to do for creating some kind of a pretty complicated analysis is very few on the user end chart. So we are trying to work it so that you can basically use plain text to search for these templates and create these analysis for you. Thirdly is the pipeline map layer. So SynMax has put in an enormous amount of effort into getting our own pipeline scrapes and also displaying the individual pipeline locations and classifications for those locations. So whether a given pipeline location is a production point or it's rescom, like a consumption point. So we are scraping all of that data. We currently display it as an aggregated form in our energy dashboard, but this is also something we want to expose to our customers. This is, for example, a very common request from our clients, like why the pipe scrapes for a given given subregion look a certain way. So that kind of drilling down into the data is what we want to enable with this kind of pipeline map layer. There's also questions around revisions to individual pipeline flows throughout the day. So that's also we want to start tracking using this tool. Then one other category is, the fourth category is the geology layer. So we have also been pulling in a lot of geology data into our databases. Like currently, we have not really done a lot of analysis using that geology layer. It basically goes in as a feature where present for our short-term forecast models. But we also want to expose that information to our customers. This is not relevant for perhaps all customers like traders, but there's a certain class of customers who are very interested in how a certain formation, let's say in the Permian, is behaving compared to other formations in relation to historic production, or how our forecasts are looking like by formation and county. So this is another layer which we are hoping to add as heat maps onto the Hyperion Geo platform. There's also a lot of other information which we have pulled in, which relates to well logs, oil and gas in place, maps, structure maps. A lot of this is public information. Some of this we have kind of put together ourselves. So we want to kind of come up with a way to display all of this on the Hyperion Geo platform. And lastly is more kind of specialized analysis. So some of this I've touched on in the previous slides. Basically, this is related to neighbor analysis, like both of these categories. Like, for example, the first one, the parent-child analysis, this has been a hot button issue in the shale industry for many years now. Like, are we drilling too close to parent wells? Like, how are we degrading productivity of child wells with parent wells? So we have all of the bottom hole locations and the depths and the horizontal lengths of both parent and child wells in our database. We put those features in as that information as features into our short-term forecast models. We want to now come up with a way to display that information to our clients on their end so they can do their own parent-child analysis. One other related topic is future drilling locations. Again, a very hot button topic in the industry is that, for some of the mature plays, like, are there even any drilling locations left? So that kind of an analysis should also be enabled by using the Hyperion Geo platform. So that's kind of really it from my end. So we really hope you use the tool, play with it, look at our satellite images, production data, forecasts, and we always welcome feedback on this tool. So yeah, that's kind of it. I'm going to hand this back to Eric if he has
Sure.
any comments.
Sophia, should we jump into Q&A?
Yeah, of course. So we have a couple questions that were submitted while you guys were presenting, but everyone else who's still watching, feel free to submit more questions in through the chat. First one, do you believe there are no DTILs in the Haynesville?
So I have to be very careful. This is a public webinar. I don't want to give away any client edge to anybody. Details are possible anywhere. And we are monitoring the Haynesville, and we do have intelligence on whether there are or not details in the Haynesville. Sorry to be so cryptic about it. If you're a Hyperion customer and you'd like the answer to that question, go ahead and shoot us an email, support@synmax.com. We'll share with you our exact view on Haynesville details.
Another question, what is your current lower 48 frac crew count?
Again, I really apologize. I'm not trying to be a slippery politician here or anything, but this is a public webinar. We do want to kind of show off in broad strokes the work that we're doing and give intelligence around what type of data is available, but I'm not going to give any specifics. So, Hyperion customers, you're welcome to ask these questions directly to us. We'll get right back to you.
Can you provide an example of how the detailed surprise forecast will work/look like? Do you provide a probability of an increase/decrease and a magnitude of the change over the next X days?
Yeah, so the way we're presenting that data is basically we're maintaining a current detail inventory. So every well that's in a delayed till state, we have it in our inventory lists. We provide that to customers. We've been providing it in reports to customers. Now it's going to be reports, and you can also access it through Hyperion Geo. As far as probabilities of when these wells are going to come online, we provided some color about what we think based on the futures curve and what we've seen in past years on when we think operators could bring these on. But this is still, I think, kind of a new and emerging area, right? So obviously last year this was November. Everything came on all at once, right? Well, every year is different, and there's a very different futures curve this year than there was last year, and so it's completely possible that operators could delay that. Maybe they don't bring them on in November. Maybe they bring them on in December. Maybe they bring them on in January. So our opinion on exactly how that's going to play out, we include that in our research reports to customers, and also we're constantly monitoring it. So like I talked about before, there's we believe between a 3 and a 7 day lag from when we can first observe till equipment on the well pad site to when that production is going to hit the pipes. So we're watching that very closely, especially as winter is coming. We're watching it extremely closely. We want to make sure Hyperion customers are the first to know when this happens. So probabilities aside, you should get advance notice before any big changes in production from details occur.
Awesome. Do you have any examples of what you put out in February about shut-ins and details?
Yeah, so one of the big research reports that we sent out, I had alluded to it in the slide, and I guess that came out in May. I'm trying to think of what came out in February. In February, we were just spinning up the project. So, the typical report, and again, February was a long time ago. I don't have it off the top of my head. Is that we usually divide it into here's new activity, and that new activity can be wells entering the detail inventory or wells exiting the detail inventory. And then we provide a breakout both by operator and subregion. So that breakout, we provide the individual well pad IDs, which is a SynMax ID, but you can look it up and get the individual API numbers. The sheet's just a little bit cumbersome to do it by API, especially when you get into EQT wells. We give all the relevant dates about when the well was completed, so when it entered detail state, and then if the well is tilled, we keep it on that sheet and show it as a production well, and then we also include information about what we expect it to produce, just kind of a direct feed from our short-term forecast at the well level. And it all aggregates up so you can see, okay, here's the total in BCF per region, per operator of what's in the detail bucket.
And sticking on to some of these detail questions, can you describe more of the process of how you use satellite imagery to track details? Is it automated or is it an analyst looking at every well?
Right now, it's an analyst looking at every well. I'd love to make it automated, but it's a lot more complicated than just rigs and frac crews. Rigs and frac crews look very distinct in satellite images, even in 3-meter imagery. So we're combing over these images by hand. Now, we are, I think, a technologically advanced company. We do use AI when we're doing our frac crew and rig analysis. And so, I would like to get to the point where we can do this completely by AI, but I don't want to do that prematurely at the sacrifice of accuracy. So if you know anything about AI, the best AI works on a good training data set. And so right now I'd say we're in the stage of building a good training data set, and then we'll feel more comfortable passing it off to an automated process.
And how long can you hold details before they need to be turned in line?
That's a great question. And that was one of the big questions that we initially had when we started doing this project. Well, what's it going to do to the reservoir, right? Are we going to see worse producing wells? Is it going to impact their declines? Is it going to impact their IP rates? We got a lot of opinions from a lot of different geologists, both in-house and external geologists. And the report was kind of mixed. But, I think we are much more confident that this is less of a concern now that we've gone back through the state data and seen that detailing has been a common practice, especially in the Northeast in the past. So operators have been using details like we talked about in the presentation, and they have not seen degradation of wells. Now, does that mean that there isn't some kind of upper limit on when you could see degradation of a well? No, certainly not. But we have examples of wells being detailed with proppant sand and fluids in the ground for 6 months, and yet the wells are still producing as expected. So as of right now, it doesn't look like we've hit that limit if it does exist.
Okay. Probably two more directed towards Rahul. How far out does the short-term forecast go, and what are the standard errors?
So right now, the short-term forecast goes out 2 months, but the declines go out 10 years. So that's kind of the time horizon. The reason it goes out 2 months is because any completion activity which is currently happening, it will typically finish within the next month or so, and then the well usually tills within the next 2 months or so. So that's kind of why it cuts off at 2 months. Like that's what we believe is a reasonable future time horizon. In terms of errors, for each region, we typically try to keep our error bounds within like a 0.3 BCF, which we were pretty good at maintaining before the detail project started. So right now, the short-term forecast basically does not account for details. Basically the way we use the short-term forecast with the details is that we see that what the production would have been without considering the details. And then you have like a nice quantitative estimate of how much production is being lost because of the details. So that's kind of how we've been using the short-term forecast.
And then a future question for Hyperion Geo. Is there a well lasso function where I would be able to create a grouping of wells of which I would then be able to pull that set of data using the API?
The answer is yes, but I think the first thing to come out will probably be filtering the wells based on operators and counties and so on, because at least internally, when we've been doing the development, once you start using well lassos, then you kind of have to worry about did you select all the wells or not all the wells. It is something we'll also develop based on client feedback. So if clients really think that the well lasso function is much more useful than filtering based on well metadata, then that's what we're going to do. Yeah, but it's certainly possible. But there's nothing technologically preventing us from doing that.
Awesome. Kind of an opinion question. What do you think is the most important thing to track for 2026 production?
2026. That's 4 trader lifetimes away. I think LNG, most definitely, right? LNG ramp is going to be a huge determining factor, even influencing production. Right? The producers are all watching that stuff very closely. They're all talking about in their earnings presentations being LNG ready, and those projects routinely are delayed. So I think that's what I'd be watching.
Awesome. Does EQT do their quick shut-in only in southwestern Pennsylvania or northeast Pennsylvania? I mean, the ones that start and come back on very quickly.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part of that? I talked over you.
Yeah, no, the wells that start and come back on very quickly.
Yeah, so I've seen examples of EQT doing it both in northeast Pennsylvania and southwest Pennsylvania. There are a few recent examples of that. Pennsylvania, in fact, the Northeast in general is a lot easier to measure what shut-ins are occurring there than other regions because the pipeline scrapes are so great up there, right? So not only are the pipeline scrapes really, really good up there, like almost 100% of production flows through measurable pipes, as opposed to you get into the Permian in Texas and it's only 17% of production flows through pipes. But they're also labeled really well up there. So, in some of our research reports that we've sent out recently, we've been able to tag this, hey, this looks like an EQT versus another operator shut-in, because the gathering systems are tagged to the individual operators. I haven't done enough analysis of the state data in the other regions to really tie it all back to who the operator was when we see shut-ins in those states. But, it definitely occurs in northeast and southwestern Pennsylvania. It does occur in other places. We have seen shut-ins in the Haynesville, but because the pipeline data is not as good, you can only do a retrospective analysis when the state well level data comes out to tie it back to an operator.
Next one, do you see any details on oil wells?
The focus of our project right now is the Haynesville and the Northeast. So those are generally gassier regions. Have not looked into the Permian or Permian, New Mexico, which is where the oil wells would be. I have not seen indicators of details there. So we haven't picked up anything from operator earnings calls, and we haven't seen that kind of behavior in the oil production data coming out. But I wouldn't preclude it being a possibility.
Okay. And then our last question here, will refracs be tracked on the new Geo platform in the future, specifically for the Eagle Ford?
That's a great question. So refracs are currently included in our data set. We don't stop monitoring wells after the first frac crew happens. We continue monitoring them. And so if a frac crew comes back and refracs a well, it's already included in our data set and it's already included in our total frac count. However, right now we're not tagging those. We're not giving some type of feature to those wells and saying this is a refrac versus an original frac. I know refracs are picking up in the Eagle Ford, and so this is something we've been looking at, adding that tag in. And should we add that tag in, then yes, it'll be a filterable feature on the front end.
We had another question come in. Are certain areas more susceptible to well degradation when choking wells?
Oof. You have an opinion on that?
No, that's like a two-level question. I don't actually. It's kind of difficult, I think, from just like a purely data analysis, because choking does happen, very widely across the Northeast. But then if you want to separate out what the compounding effect of the rock quality is with the choking, we have not done that kind of an analysis before. But that is an interesting question.
All right. That looks like all the questions that we have here. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. You can reach out to any of us clients if you have any questions, or anyone else on the webinar at support@synmax.com, or Sophia@synmax.com, or Eric@synmax.com. Any of the, reach out to us.
Our Verma@synmax.com.
No, Sophia can take
or just Sophia and support. So clients, the feature should be up and you should be able to start playing with it. And we hope you all enjoy it.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Take care.
Take care.